Welcome back to the Alt. I'm your host, Shapirian. Thank you for joining me again. Week 2 Sunday in the books. We got Falcons-Eagles tonight. I don't even know that Week 2 gave us enough time to talk about it because there's just so much that happened on this Week 2 Sunday. It was a loaded slate. There's 2 weeks down now, not just one, so we're able to make a little more of blanket statements safely about certain teams. And then we're left to wonder with other teams, can I make a blanket statement about you, or am I going to regret doing so later? Well, who's the real you? The goods or the bads? We'll talk all about it. I've got some teams that are 0-2 that I'm concerned about. I've got some teams that are 2-0 that I'm like, I don't know. Could be frisky, could be not. That's a term that gets used sometimes. There's a lot from week 2. I'm going to start with the game of the week because it was the game of the week, and you'll have to forgive me if you're like, oh brother. I'm going to cover it the best I can. Bengals, Chiefs, 26-25 in favor of Kansas City. They kick a game-winning field goal as time expires, as they always do when it gets down to this situation. Butker doesn't miss. Love him, hate him. It doesn't matter. He doesn't miss that kick. To get it out of the way, because I just, you can't talk about this game without talking about it. I want to talk about the call, because that is a really tough call where you have to look at it and wonder, is this going to impact the season? Is this going to impact the playoff seeding here? And I'm going to preface everything else I have to say about this game and this call with this, my tweet that I put out about 25 minutes after Bengals-Chiefs ended. Because I think, as of right now, this is my best take that I have on it. I said, quote, this is at the Alt NFL on Twitter. Follow your boy if you haven't. And if you are watching on YouTube, do me a favor, please consider hitting subscribe. It really helps. Seriously, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. But I tweeted at the Alt NFL and said, I'll put out a revision of this if I change my mind with some sleep tonight. But I just 100% do not think the refs call this if the sides are flipped. That's my issue. There's enough there for a flag, but one team has had enough of these go in their favor that it just feels off. If you've watched the Kansas City Chiefs over the past 4 to 5 seasons, do you really disagree with this? I'm on the record, by the way, if you're a Chiefs fan listening, I like the Chiefs just fine. Just fine. As a Bengals fan, I'm glad you kept Baltimore from winning a Super Bowl last year. I love the way Mahomes plays the game. I've always liked Kelsey. I've liked Kelsey for like a decade at this point. I think you generally have a lot of very likable players on this team. That said, here we are again. Another Mahomes-Burrow classic where I'm going to have to look back on this and say, ugh, that call decided the game, and it is a iffy one, my guy. And I get that there's Chiefs fans that say, oh, that's a frustrating call or a frustrating no call. There's always frustrating no calls when these two teams play. Always. Okay, the lack of an offensive pass or lack of a defensive pass interference call early in the game where I believe it was Cam Taylor-Britt goes all over Rashee Rice, get in front of him from behind and smack the ball down. I think he ended up hitting him in the helmet, actually. They're frustrated by that one, but it's like these games always have that one. It's the ones that get called that make me concerned. We saw 2 years ago in the AFC title game, Joseph Osai puts 2 hands into Mahomes' back as he's heading out, and then does like this motion. He goes like, it wasn't just back, it was, okay, that's enough for 15 yards. They kick the field goal on the next play, game's over. We saw right before that a missed block in the back on a punt return. Massive. So you want to talk about missed calls? That's a huge one. That's a huge one. Put it back from the spot of the foul. And then that play probably doesn't even happen. And if it does happen from Osai and he does hit Mahomes late, it's not a field goal. So the calls in these games are causing people to say, man, the refs just keep getting in the way. And they are getting in the way of these games. And the fact that one team has been on the right side of these touchy calls, iffy calls, because say what you want. And I'll say, before I go any further, I'll say my piece on it and say, I do think there's enough in that to say, yes, that was pass interference. 100% I do. My issue isn't with the call. My issue is with the lack of trust in the system to have the call made from both sides. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I'm not sitting here saying, I can't believe they called that. That's not pass interference. He didn't deserve a flag there. I think it's a close one to where you could reasonably on either side. I'm on the side of that was a pass interference on him. My issue is if that is, Jamar Chase down there trying to catch a 4th and 16, and L'Jarius Sneed or Connor or Reed or anyone else comes down and does that exact same play, do I trust? Seriously, sit and think with me. Just be honest with yourself here. You can say, yes, I trust it, and okay, that's great if you do. But do you really trust that the refs make the call if the teams are flipped? If that is Bills Chiefs and the Chiefs are on defense on that play and it's the AFC title game, do you trust them to call that on the Chiefs? And it's like, I am not sitting here saying the NFL is rigged. Obviously, I'm not saying that. I don't think that. I don't think anybody with a real brain actually thinks that. But the fact that we have to have these discussions year in and year out is nauseating, and I'm tired of it. So that's my stance. Do I think it was a good call? There was enough there for a DPI call. There was. That's probably just in the ref's judgment. My issue is I don't know that the ref would have had the judgment to say that that was a call going against the Chiefs. Now let's get into the actual game, because this was a huge game all around, weird game all around. Mahomes with 2 picks, weird one, Burrow with a fumble, returned for a touchdown that in real time I could have sworn he was down, and then upon replay it's like, no, that ball was definitely out. It definitely was a fumble. Weird game all around. I want to talk about the coaching from both sides. We saw a distinctly different game from the Bengals on offense in this one, in that they used a lot of 12 personnel. Sometimes they even would have 3 tight ends out there, and it was like, oh, okay, we're doing this now. And for the first time in his career, he threw for over 150 yards to his tight ends. Joe Burrow, that is. It's never happened before. That is going to be the key to unlocking this offense, because the Chiefs weren't able to tee off on the Bengals as often in this one as the Patriots were in week 1. And so I have to wonder, what was the Patriots' game plan? Were you... And it sounds so dumb to wonder this, but I have to, after I watched week 1 and I watched week 2. Were you looking ahead to the Chiefs and saying, let's not put any of this stuff on film. We don't want them to know. Because now you're 0-2 instead of the 1-1 that you should be. I preached all offseason for the Bengals, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, because you had the Patriots, Commanders, and Panthers in your first 4 games. You need to be 3-1. It's out of the window now. You can't. You almost redeemed yourself today, and we're on track to go 3-1, but you didn't, and now you're not. Sorry. But the coaching for the Bengals looked a lot better in this one on both sides. Even though they gave up more points, it's the Chiefs, it's Mahomes, it's 26 points. You're probably going to take that every time that you can get it, as long as the offense is able to keep you in the game, which they were today. From the Chiefs side, 2, could have been 3 interceptions from Mahomes, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Am I wrong for that? I guess the CTB interception ended up being on the same drive as one of them, so I guess it was just 2. But a weird game from Mahomes. He just didn't look his best today. But the Chiefs were able to run all over the Bengals. They averaged 4.7 yards a carry and looked really good in the run game, which I knew they would. I knew they were going to look good in the run game, and I knew this was going to be a key for the Chiefs in this one. So I'm not surprised on that front. I'm honestly surprised that they stopped running the ball as early as they did. It seemed like they kind of gave up on the run game, other than to get the clock rolling. The reason they were in that weird 4th down spot is because they didn't throw on 1st down on that set of downs. It's because they ran the ball to be like, let's get this clock rolling. Come on, we don't want to give them any time left, and so they didn't. But with that said, great game offensively from Kansas City. In terms of the game plan, you game planned in a way that allowed you to exploit the weaknesses of the Bengals, which is the interior defensive line and poor tackling from the linebacking core if a guy gets back there untouched, which happened a lot. And that was the case on a lot of these carries. So Pacheco didn't get any really big burners, but he was getting 7 or 8 on 1st down a lot. They averaged 7 yards on 1st down through the first half almost. A lot of that just from Isaiah Pacheco. So hats off to them. Great game plan there. And I've got this to say about the Kansas City Chiefs. 2 weeks in, you've beaten the Ravens and you've beaten the Bengals. Like it, hate it, love it, whatever. Those are two big wins for Kansas City. Two huge wins for Kansas City. And I have this to say. This is a prediction, okay? First of all, I already regret not picking them to win the Super Bowl. We're not take jumping. I picked Baltimore, and that is that. And we'll talk about Baltimore to close the show off today, by the way. Don't think they're getting off the hook. But I have this to say about the Kansas City Chiefs right now. I think they start the season 9-0 now. At least. Maybe more, depending on what happens week 10. Or it could be week 11 at that point, I believe, due to bye weeks and such. I think it's week 10. I think they have a late bye. Yeah. I think they start 9-0. After the Ravens at home, Bengals at home, you now have the Falcons on the road, the Chargers on the road, the Saints at home. They'll come back to earth by then, surely to God, right? You have the 49ers on the road, the Raiders on the road, Buccaneers at home, Broncos at home, and then you go to Buffalo week 10, I believe, unless I've got my dates mixed up here and it's actually week 11. You go to Buffalo week 10, and I think Kansas City enters that game week 9-0. I think they entered that game 9-0. And at which point, it's Kansas City. Buffalo has been able to beat them a handful of times, but Kansas City does tend to win those games. And now you have to sit and wonder, okay, are they going to go like 15-2? Something like that? Something to keep an eye on. It's not a full-blown prediction to say. That's what I'm saying. I think they start 9-0. I don't think you're going to get a sleeper game from them. They're locked in, guys. They know what's at stake. They know the history that's on the line here, and they're ready to go make it. A couple more points from Bengals Chiefs and we'll move on. One of the things that I have to focus on, because it matters, and it is a distinct difference between the Chiefs and almost any other team in the NFL. Okay, there's very few teams. I feel like Baltimore is in this category sometimes. San Francisco's in this category sometimes. And you'll notice those are three of the top teams in the league. This is what I have to say about it. In this game, I think the Chiefs, they played weird. I don't want to say bad. You put up 26 points. It's not like you played poorly overall. But I think the Chiefs can play poorly and still win. On the flip side of it, I think the Bengals can play well and still lose. Therefore, I look at that and I say, well, that's why the Chiefs have back-to-back Super Bowl wins. 100% it is. The Chiefs find ways to win games where the other team has outplayed them. I think the Bengals outplayed them here. I have Chiefs fans on my timeline saying Bengals outplayed us today. Notable Chiefs fans with like thousands of followers among the fan base and people know them and things like that saying Bengals outplayed us today. Great game. I agree. They did. Chiefs still won. No moral victories. I'm not taking moral victories. I said it last week on Overreaction Monday. I'm saying it again today. It's not a moral victory for the Bengals. You're not off the hook. You're 0-2. 0-2 was inexcusable to start this year. You're 0-2. Sorry. I don't want to hear it. You're 0-2. You're in a pickle. Because now you're going to be fighting to stay at 500 for months. Months. It might be late November and you might be hovering around 500 still. Why? Because you're 0-2. You couldn't be 0-2. But that's it for that one. Bengals are 0-2. You can't lose for at least back-to-back games because you now have the Commanders and the Panthers. You have to win both of those, or the season, I'm ready to say, is over and you're not making the playoffs. I'm ready to say that at that point if you lose to the Commanders or the Panthers. I'm not ready to say you're for sure making the playoffs if you beat both of those teams, but I am willing to say if you lose either of those games, that's it. Season's over. You don't have a shot of making the playoffs if you lose either of these games. Because you can play well against good teams and still find ways to lose. The Chiefs don't do that. The Ravens don't do that often. The 49ers don't do that often. That's the difference. Congrats to the Chiefs. You're 2-0. I think you're well on your way to at least a 9-0 start. We'll see what happens here. The Chiefs could go on a crazy run this year. Moving on to some surprise teams here. I'm very shocked about at least one of these teams. The second one, I'm like, okay. But one of these teams, I'm like, man, I didn't see this coming at all. The Vikings are 2-0, and Sam Darnold looked exactly like what people said he might based off of the Kevin O'Connell offensive system. He takes what's given to him, and he has enough arm talent to make certain plays happen. I adore that from Sam Darnold. And I heard people say, this is not my own sentence, although I agree with it, so I recited it on the pod pretty early on in the show. I've heard people say, this is Sam Darnold's best chance to succeed he's had in his entire career. I agree. It is. Those Jets teams were bad. The Panthers had that weird start where he looked like he was on fire, but those Panthers teams were bad. He was a backup in San Francisco. And this Vikings team is 2 years removed, albeit a lot of less talent out there than they had. 2 years removed from a juggernaut team in the regular season. And last year, they never really got off the ground, and Kirk tore his Achilles. Now you're that starting quarterback. This is a great opportunity for him. I might need to dig a little deeper and say, okay, here's what they're looking at. Here's the rest of the AFC North, and wonder, because the Lions look very beatable so far, can the Vikings somehow find a way to win this division? We will see. Sam Darnold has to keep them in games, and he's done so. He's asked to do a little bit more in this offense than just don't lose us the game. It's not like a Mike Tomlin offense. Congrats to the Steelers, you're 2-0. It's not a Mike Tomlin offense where it's like, please don't lose us this game. Just take what they give you and don't do another darn thing. That's not the Kevin O'Connell offense. Did you see that deep shot to Jefferson? Unbelievable. By the way, Jefferson's day-to-day, not expected to be anything worrisome. And I'm going to take his word and the medical expert's word for it on saying day-to-day, and him saying it's nothing to worry about. So he's fine. He'll be fine. Will the Vikings be fine? If they start 3-0, you can't deny talking about them anymore. If the Vikings come out next week, and we're sitting here saying, okay, guys, you have wins over the Giants. We don't care about that. The 49ers, relevant. And the Houston Texans? Are we not sitting here saying, who can't they beat? Who can't they beat at that point? We have to. We have to have that conversation by then. Another team in the same boat? What is going on with the New Orleans Saints? I watched every second of that game today. What is going on with the New Orleans Saints? Alvin Kamara looks like he's in his legible prime. We were wondering if maybe that was behind him. I think it was because last year was a weird year. He had the suspension, didn't ever quite do what people wanted him to do, and then the Saints were just playing a weird brand of offense. But I talked last week and said, offense looks totally different. Clint Kubiak is running a totally different offense than they were running last season. Dennis Allen seems to be really leaning into that. And this team looks completely different. I don't even know what to say about the Saints. Night and day doesn't begin to cover it, in my opinion. But I said they look 100% different due to a coaching change. Derek Carr looks the most efficient he's looked in his entire career. Like him or hate him, I can understand if you're a Raiders fan or even a Saints fan after last season saying, I'm frustrated with him being my team's starting quarterback. He is frustrating to watch. He is frustrating to watch. He makes a lot of poor decisions, and he tries to do a little more than he's able to, as if he's Mahomes or Lamar sometimes. And it's like, you're not those guys. You're not Josh Allen. But that being said, he has a lot of arm talent. You cannot deny Derek Carr has a lot of arm talent. It's just that the decision-making is always leaving a lot to be desired sometimes. If this offense keeps putting him in positions to succeed there, he took what they gave him all game. And what they gave him was a lot of intermediate stuff. It wasn't even just dink and dunk. There was a lot of stuff in this game against Dallas where it was that's what the defense forced him to do, and he made the throw. This game was never a competition. 44-19 final score. And the Saints are 2-0. And I have to wonder now, similar to the Vikings, can they win the NFC South? Tampa's also 2-0. They're the defending champs. They have a lot to say about that. We've got the Falcons playing the Eagles tonight. I don't think the Falcons are going to win this game. As a bit of a spoiler alert, I guess, I will do my full score prediction later on in this episode. But I don't know. The Saints, I just didn't see them being a notable team going into this year. I thought this was the year they were going to collapse. I'm not willing to back down from that yet. I'm not. Because it's week 2. We've seen teams start week 2, 2-0, finish 6-11. And if that happens, it's a failure of a year for the Saints. But you're in the NFC South. And so you can't just ignore that it's not going to take a lot for them to be able to get this done and get to the playoffs and be fighting for a divisional title in a home playoff game. That's what Derek Carr has his team looking like right now. That's what Clint Kubiak has his team looking like. Rashid Shaheed is looking like a genuine threat on offense, playing a similar role to like Jameson Williams in the Detroit offense almost, although I think Jameson is a bit of a better receiver. This roster has holes all over it looks like, and they are handily winning football games through the first 2 weeks. We'll see if they can continue it or not. I don't know. Vikings, Saints, hats off to you. You deserve every bit of praise that you get from the national media this week, which I hope is a fair amount. On the flip side, a team that I said, 2 teams technically, that I said can't start 0-2. You cannot start 0-2. You cannot start 0-2. You cannot start 0-2. Have started 0-2. I am concerned about the Indianapolis Colts. I'll put it out here right now. I admire transparency. I don't think people are transparent enough. So I'll do it myself and say I have to watch this game still. I have seen probably 6 plays or so from this game right now. Maybe less. Okay? With that said, and that out of the way, I am concerned for the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson, 17 for 34, 204 yards, 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions. That's not going to cut it. And I get you've had the Texans and I get you've had the Packers. But your team that, although I picked you to win the division, and that wasn't necessarily the sexy pick, you are a team that's expected to be in games and be winning a handful of games. It's not like you're expected to be scrubs. You're expected to be competing in these games. Why haven't you yet? And I shouldn't say competed. You have competed. You have competed. You have competed. You were close. You're, a touchdown in this game and a field goal last week from being 2-0. And then we're like, see, told you the Colts are going to be fine. With that said, man, you couldn't start 0-2. You have a rough month ahead. And the AFC South is not going to be an easy division to win. It just isn't. You're lucky the Jags have given you a bit of a break there because you're really just going to be chasing the Texans. It seems like, anyways. With all due respect, Jacksonville. I'll let my boy Treads handle that this week when he comes back on. But you can't do what you've done. You can't start 0-2. And Anthony Richardson, there are accuracy concerns that I have to point out because I love your ceiling. I love your upside. You still might have a higher ceiling than a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young or whoever else went last year, Will Levis. But I have to wonder, what would it take for Anthony Richardson to hit his ceiling as a quarterback? Because the decision-making seems to leave a lot to be desired, although the arm talent is otherworldly, probably top 5 in the NFL. I don't know that the Colts are going to be able to scratch and claw to make the playoffs with a quarterback that plays Anthony Richardson's style. I'm concerned about the Indianapolis Colts. I don't know if I'm fully sounding the alarm yet, but there are concerns. We'll talk about that tomorrow in a segment that I have planned. That's all I have for the Colts right now. Congrats to Malik Willis and the Packers for getting it done. I have to say, if the Packers can run that style of game and win, you are probably talking about Jordan Love returning to a team that's 2-2 to go against the Rams that just gave up 41 points. If Love just misses the 3-week minimum that we're expecting for this injury, you're probably 2-2, and you take that. Malik Willis got you 1 win in a possible 3 games he's doing. You take that all day. You're not even a little bit scared of that in that case. You're like, okay, cool. We're 2-2 with Love. That's fine. I'm out here begging for the Bengals to be 2-2 with Joe Burrow. Why would I not want the Packers to be 2-2 with Jordan Love? Malik Willis just did exactly what they needed him to do in the first of 3 attempts. So hats off to you, Green Bay. Now, the other 4 o'clock game from Sunday of Rams-Cardinals was never a game. Arizona throttled the Rams 41-10. Stafford didn't throw any picks, but it was just like, it didn't matter what they did. They never established the run game. I think Blake Corum ended up with more yards per carry than Kyron Williams did, and myself and a bunch of other people were talking about how this run game and this McVay offense is the key to them being a super successful offense. I agree completely. I still agree completely. Couldn't get it going against Arizona, who let people run all over him last year for the most part. And Kyler Murray. Dude. Where was this last year? You had the injuries going into the season, never really quite got it going, and the Cardinals were a very empty roster last year. Let me ask you this. They've made some improvements, but is that not still a very empty roster? Is the difference just Kyler Murray making right decisions so far? Because right now it's like, this Cardinals team, like, what is the ceiling for them? They should have beaten Buffalo last week and they didn't. If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, but I'll have a Merry Christmas. I get it. This is a team that should be 2-0. You're in the NFC West. The 49ers did not look great today, although I do still think they'll run away with the division. I'm not concerned. I'm not going to sound the alarm on the 1-1 49ers after a weird Sam Darnold game. But I will say Arizona's going to be right there for a playoff team in the NFC. The NFC is not as deep as the AFC is, in my opinion. And so you can have a team that's just like, yeah, we're clearly not the best team in our division, but our quarterback is really good. And if he makes the right choices, he has the talent to win us 11 games. That's what the Cardinals looked like today. I'm going to go back and rewatch it, but I saw nothing from this game that looked even minorly discouraging from Kyler Murray. He looks at the level he was in 2021 where we were like, is he going to win MVP? Do you guys remember that? Do you remember the Kyler Murray MVP talks? They were real. Arizona, great game today. LA, don't know what the heck that was. You cannot do it again. That defense is going to have holes in it. That offensive line is beaten up and is going to keep the run game from ever really getting established against a team that tees off on it. And I don't know what to think about the Rams. I'm going to need some time because they're now 0-2. That's a tough hole to crawl out of in the NFC West. But 0-2 is not a death sentence. It's not. One more thing before we get to my score prediction for Eagles-Falcons tonight. And I just want to say, Ravens. Bro. What was that? Minshew outplayed Lamar Jackson today. Gardner Minshew outplayed Lamar Jackson today. Gardner Minshew outplayed Lamar Jackson on Sunday. I shouldn't say today. This episode is going live on Monday. Gardner Minshew outplayed Lamar Jackson. He didn't outplay him by a ton. He didn't run circles around him. But here we are, and for I want to say it's like the 7th time in like the last 2 or 3 years, the Ravens had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter and lost the game. With 13 unanswered today from Vegas. What is that? And it was like, that secondary is very much trusted. Okay, like, they trust their secondary to go out there and keep them in games and shut down people when it matters. And their secondary couldn't stop Devontae Adams all game. That's an all-pro receiver, I get it. But he's got Gardner Minshew throwing him the ball. There were plays, if you watch Ravens-Raiders, where it was just like, get it to Devontae, don't care. Get it to Devontae, don't care. Where's Adams? Here he is. I don't care who's on him. They couldn't stop it. Marlon Humphrey has had a couple of miscues already, which is very uncharacteristic from him. He has been solid for them at points. And I don't know what to think. It's not like you got destroyed. It's not like you got killed, but this was at home. You were the biggest favorites of the week. 2 weeks into the season, both of the biggest favorites of the week have lost outright. What? Dude, you cannot start 0-2 looking like you have. Because in the Kansas City game, you looked really good and you still couldn't win the game. In the Raiders game, you looked really bad at points. Bad at points. It just seemed like Lamar never got started today. The Raiders took what the defense gave them against the Ravens today, and that is what Kansas City did en route to defeating them themselves in Week 1 on that Thursday night opener. There is a huge benefit for Baltimore moving forward, and that is you don't play Max Crosby or Chris Jones every week. You don't even play either of them again for the rest of the season unless you see them in January. With that said, is it that much of a concern for them? They lost like 40% of their line, but I don't think they lost a super strong portion of their offensive line. I wasn't concerned about the offensive line turnover. I am now. Max Crosby had his way with that line. Is that all it takes is a definitive edge rusher? Because guess what, guys? You play in the AFC North. TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, and Trey Hendrickson. The best football player that a casual player doesn't know, by the way, is Trey Hendrickson. They all play in that, and they can wreck games. Okay, Hendrickson had got his fair share of Mahomes against that offensive line this year. So far, I should say, against that offensive line this week. That's 6 of your games still. 6 of them. And now you're in a position similar to Cincy. Cincy and Baltimore are 0-2 right now on a collision course for Week 5, which is in Cincinnati, where you're both having to say, God, I hope we're 2-2 going into this game. And we really need to be 3-2 leaving it. One of them will be 2-3 through 5 weeks at best. Potentially worse if one of them drops one. And the thing with Cincy versus Baltimore, Cincy's schedule is undeniably a lot lighter. Especially in the middle of it. Baltimore, you were on my list with the Colts and with the Falcons of teams that can't start 0-2. And I don't understand how you let yourself start 0-2. This was an easy to spot trap game. Raiders had nothing to lose, you had everything to lose. And you lost. I'm just concerned that they never seem to get going on offense. Props to the Raiders. I hate when a team wins a game and the story is, how'd that team lose that game? But it has to be when it's the biggest underdog of the week, dude. The Raiders aren't going to win a lot of football games this season. They are not. Gardner Minshew is good to keep you in games. He's not good to win you a lot. He did enough today to beat Baltimore and that defense. Props to him. I don't know that they deserve for the story to be, oh my God, the Raiders just won it. Because it really just seemed like the Ravens lost it. They played to not lose in the fourth quarter. And when you play to not lose, losing is what you do a lot of the time. I hate when teams do that, by the way. I despise when you play to not lose a football game. Because you tend to lose football games where you play to not lose. So, your next 3 for Baltimore. At Dallas. At home against Buffalo. At Cincinnati. Dallas got trounced today. I'll talk a little more about it. I'm not hating on them today. I am giving props to the Saints for that one because they just seemed like the better team all day. But tell me there's not a world, in all seriousness, tell me there's not a world where the Baltimore Ravens are 0-5 because those are the next 3 games we've already seen them lose to the Raiders. I know there's a world where they're 3-2 and they take care of business in Jerry World, beat Allen at home, and then come out and beat Burrow on the road in Cincy. I know that's the case. So tell me there's not a world where they're 0-5. If they're 1-4, do you feel better? I don't. And this is my Super Bowl pick. Come on, man. You couldn't lose this game. How did you lose this game to the Las Vegas Raiders today? I don't know how. I don't think it's excusable. And I think you're in trouble. I just do. I think you're in big trouble. That's a tough schedule ahead. I obviously still think you're going to make the playoffs, and I think you will be fine overall, but I think it's going to be a rocky ride to get there because the holes on this team compared to last year's roster have been prominent so far. So that out of the way, let's move on to the Monday night game, where I don't have a ton to say because it just seems like this game is going to reek, if I'm being honest with you, because the Falcons... I loved them on paper going into the season. I had so many concerns about Kirk. Going back and rewatching Falcons Steelers Week 1, I expressed my concerns. I said Kirk looked really bad. He looked immobile, I should say. He couldn't run any real play action where he got out of the pocket, the naked bootlegs, none of that stuff. And that's what makes a Kirk Cousins offense work. Eagles, on the other hand, beat the Packers, who are a real, genuine threat in the NFC, despite Jalen Hurts making a ton of terrible decisions all game. That's the Chiefs thing I mentioned. That's the Ravens thing I mentioned, just not today. That's the 49ers thing I mentioned. They find ways to win games when you play badly. I don't think the Eagles as a whole played badly, but I think Hurts, with his decision-making, had enough of a rep sheet last week to say, you played badly week 1. In Brazil, granted. But I don't have a lot of hope for the Falcons tonight. I'm just going to give a score prediction and obviously a winner prediction of this Monday night game. I think the Eagles take care of business against the Falcons and win this game. I'm going to say 31-17. I think they win by 2 touchdowns. I think there's a ton of points scored. And I don't know if that's a ton of points scored. What's that, 48? That's not a ton of points. I think the Eagles win this game pretty comfortably. I am in a bad spot with the Falcons. I said they're a team that cannot start 0-2. Both of my other teams I said that about did start 0-2. And I am predicting that the Falcons start 0-2. Tough week for my adopted children, Dolphins and the Falcons. But it is what it is. I will see you back tomorrow to talk Eagles Falcons. We're going to talk about teams that we are sounding the alarm on. And then we're going to talk about which teams that are 2-0 that we didn't really expect to be 2-0 that are contenders, which ones I think are pretenders. We're going to talk about it. I don't see why not. Besides that, I hope you enjoyed the weekend. I hope you enjoyed the episode of the show. Enjoy Monday Night Football tonight, even though I don't think it's going to be a great game. If you like the episode, like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Follow me at the NFL on Twitter and most social media platforms. But that is it for this one. I will see you tomorrow.